Byron? Yet Dinner, everyone, or I guess it's afternoon. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. I feel like I'm coming out of retirement. I've been pretty busy the last couple months, pretty much almost completely dedicated to negotiating our Arizona water settlement. I'm here today with Assistant Attorney General Michelle Espino, formerly known as, well, we're in the same room sitting next to each other, so she was just looking at me.
Sorry.
But formerly known as Assistant Attorney General Michelle Brown Yazzie. She didn't have enough things to do, so she decided to get married during the course of our settlement negotiations. And we're excited to be here with you today. We're actually in the Valley right now in discussions with the all parties in the negotiations, trying to nail down the final terms of the settlement. So the settlement is not actually final at this point, but we are eagerly awaiting finalization of the settlement. There are just a few terms that we're nailing down at this point. So thank you everyone for joining us today. It's great to be here with you all. Great to be here on Lunch and Learn again. It's been a while for me, but I'm sure you guys enjoyed the chapter series that we presented. I got a lot of positive feedback that I saw in the comments. And we do go and look at the comments. And if you have questions throughout the presentation, please ask those questions in the comments, and we can answer those questions either as we go, or we might just pause and take questions here and there throughout the presentation. There's a lot of material to get through, so we might not get through our entire PowerPoint presentation for today. But if you still have questions, you want more information, we are actually going to have 13 public presentations going through the summary of the proposed comprehensive Arizona water settlement that was made public on Wednesday. So again, the settlement is not actually final at this point. That's what we're working on literally today. And the sharing of the settlement summary was really an effort to have greater transparency in government. That's a tremendous President Nigerin, as well as the Speaker of the Navajo Nation Council, Crystalline Curley, and the council members themselves as well. They wanted to make sure that there was enough advance notice to the public of the settlement, as well as the specific terms of the settlement. So we wanted to get that summary out there so folks can start familiarizing themselves with what is being proposed in the settlement. There will be an approval process with the nation that we'll go into a little more in depth in our presentation. If you want to attend one of the public sessions, the in-person public sessions, those are going to be much lengthier, a few hours long, and you'll have not only attorneys from the Department of Justice, you'll have members of the Water Rights Commission presenting, as well as staff, technical staff from the water management branch of the nation. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. She Ethel Branch Shinsha, being Putwani Nishla, Nakai Bashish Chin, Sitnajani Dashache, Ado Nakai Dashanala. I'm the nation's 13th Attorney General and also served as the nation's 11th Attorney General, and did participate in settlement negotiations relating to the LCR at that time as well. But of course, we didn't get quite as far that time as we are today. And it's quite exciting to be at this point. I'm going to hand things over to AAG Espino to introduce herself.
Good afternoon. Michelle Espino Yinsha, Tkachi Inshle, Anaslana Bashishchin, Senajani Dashache, Anaslana Dashanala, Natniljin Datnasha, Agahit Ai Nshle, and I am the Assistant Attorney General for the Navajo Nation Department of Justice's Water Rights Unit. And very happy to be here, and very happy to be able to provide you a summary of the proposed water rights settlement. As AG Branch said, we're getting very close to the end, and we're very excited about that. So today we're going to go ahead and share information from the proposed settlement. It's not finalized yet. We're still working towards that. And I'll go ahead and start with our first slide. AG Branch, you want to go ahead and talk about how the approach that we're taking in the settlement?
Sure, absolutely. I think the primary basis from which we're negotiating this is just with that understanding of how vital water is to our community and to our continuation as Navajo people in our homelands. So that's really driving it, recognizing the traditional historical importance of water to our nation in the creation of Navajo people and Denebakea, and ensuring that we continue cohesively, collectively into the future for I always say time immemorial into the future. So that's kind of where we're rooting things. I grew up without running water. My mom's house still doesn't have running water. I always say we're going to be one of the very last homes to get running water, just because we live in such a remote and rocky region. And so having access to water is very important to me personally. And of course, with the work that I did during the pandemic, and just seeing the impact that the lack of access to water had in Navajo homes and the vulnerability that it brings to our community in terms of health inequities, also makes water and access to water extremely important to me personally. And then, of course, from a nation building perspective, to be able to grow and flourish and have a strong economy, you absolutely must have access to water. And in my work trying to assist with the President's 1,000 Homes Initiative, that is one of the issues that we bump up against, is the limitations in the nation's infrastructure for water delivery and management that can prevent growth in a particular area, even though you have other aspects. You have the land, you have power. If you don't have water as well, then you can't grow in the way that you'd like to. So this is all, kind of a backbone to growth and development on the nation. And of course, we have so many of our people who want to come home. And one of the barriers to repopulation and reassertion of our strength as a sovereign is lack of access to water. So, trying to ensure that the nation can be everything that it wants to be really requires that we have water security and water access. So Michelle, did you want to say anything further?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, and to let our viewers know that that although the two of us are giving this presentation, we have a large team working with us, and a majority of those team members are, I almost want to say all of them are Navajo Nation members, enrolled members of the Navajo Nation. And we all have stories as to why we're doing this work. We have backgrounds, dealing with the lack of access to water in our communities. And so even for me, the reason I chose to go to law school and to do this type of work. And so happy that we're able to have that support from our leadership to move this forward, and to have each other that are on the team, on the legal and technical team, and our negotiation team, which is made up of council delegates, to be able to move this. If it wasn't for each and every one of us on our teams, we wouldn't be here today. So I'm very grateful and very happy that we all are from Dinetka, and we understand and have this passion to do this work for our people. So with that, we'll go ahead and move forward. Is it cut off on your end?
Okay, so technical team, can you assist with the slide there? Yeah. So this, okay, go back. It's just the top is
cut off. Okay, so this slide really is about litigation versus settlement. And the position that we're taking is that settlement is better for the Navajo Nation than litigation. We've been in litigation ongoing for about 6 decades, and we have spent a lot of money and a lot of time and have not really received what it is that we're looking for. So we listed here, pros and cons. And when we deal with litigation, we're dealing with precedents that were set. We're having to deal with other parties who take the law and the precedents, even from cases that aren't dealing with Indian country. And so in litigation, there are different standards, like the minimal needs standard, which is really difficult for us to overcome due to the fact that the nation doesn't have water infrastructure like other communities out there. And so we're still dealing with people who haul water, who use, the minimum possible amounts of water to get through the day. And so with that data that's available, it shows that our minimal need is very minimal. So we have to overcome that in litigation. And then also in litigation, we would only receive what we call a paper decree. It would quantify our water rights. However, it would not come with funding for the water development infrastructure that we greatly need. And also, we would be limited to resources that are pertinent, which means that are connected to the reservation, that are on the reservation, and would not allow us to go beyond that. And litigation is also very adversarial. We experienced that this past summer when we had our phase 1 trial in the Little Colorado River. We were up against about a dozen other parties that had their litigation teams, battling hard against our case, against us. And also, it's very lengthy. As I said, this case has been going on since the 1970s. And we just had our first trial, our first phase of our trial in 2023. And it's very, very costly. So I'm talking millions of dollars to be able to litigate in these matters. With settlement, there's more certainty. We get to decide, we get to put our needs and our requests forward and be in the room when there's a decision made. In litigation, it's going to be up to the judge that's hearing the case, that's overseeing the case. And in this in the Little Colorado River adjudication, the judge appointed a special master. And so the special master hears the case and then comes up with a recommended decree. And we're going to talk about that recommended decree more in these public education discussions throughout the next few weeks. But we don't have a say other than what we present in the courtroom. So in settlement, we actually are in the room and we get to put forward our request and have a say in the final decision. And then also, as I said, we would receive funding for actual water infrastructure. So in our settlement, we'll go over what projects are being contemplated in the settlement to actually bring wet water to our communities. And we also can include better tools for water management. We're probably going to talk about, a management agreement that we have with the Hopi tribe and with others to ensure that we have better water management. And then also authorizations for water diversions and movement between the states and the basins. And again, we're negotiating this. It's going to be a decision, and all of those that are part of the settlement discussions, we're all trying to address everyone's water needs that are involved in these settlement negotiations. Okay, so
Michelle, can you go back to that slide?
sure.
Okay, great. So just to recap, essentially, when you're litigating a claim for water rights, you're starting from zero, and you have to affirmatively establish every aspect of your claim. You have to show historical use, you have to justify, you have to show ongoing use, with data, and then you have to justify future use based on data as well. Some of that data is census data, and the census is notorious for undercounting Navajos. And of course, a lot of Navajo people don't want to be counted in the census. And so that makes data, we don't, what I'm saying is the data that we have to work with is not as great. So, we're working with data that's limited. And we have to establish everything as we build out what our claim is. With settlement, everything's table. You're starting with everything there, and you're just making adjustments with the other parties, kind of like with a full pie, and you're divvying it up essentially with the other parties, versus with litigation where you're adding a slice, and you may not actually get back to a full pie. So that's one way of thinking about this, and that's another reason why settlement is better for the nation, particularly here. And the other issue is in litigation, many of you are probably familiar with our LCR adjudication, but that's not all that we're talking about. We're also, in the settlement, we're looking at a comprehensive Arizona water settlement that will include all of our claims in the state, including Upper Basin Colorado River, Lower Basin Colorado River, the LCR Basin, as well as the Gila River Basin rights that the nation has. Those rights in Gila River are attached to our Big Boquillas Ranch in that basin. So the scope is much, much bigger. Can you take me back, Michelle?
Yeah.
So, and then in terms of funding, if we get our adjudication, our paper judgment on what our rights are, there's nothing to help us actually utilize or exercise those rights. It would all be projects we would have to fund out of the Navajo Nation General Fund. Whereas with the settlement, because the United States will be settling claims, there will be an aspect of compensation, and that will include funding for projects. The largest project we've seen funded is less than $2 billion. So, that's kind of what we're seeing out there in terms of potential range of funding for settlements. Of course, there's never been a settlement, I don't believe, as extensive as the Navajo Nation's settlement or as the nation's claim. So we would expect that, there would be significant settlement funding for projects. And then, of course, we also, well, that's what I want to say about funding. And actually, I wish we had thrown up the map. The nation has a vision for what our water supply distribution system should look like in order to meet existing need. It shows all of the currently unconnected homes on the nation, and lays out projects that we've been planning for and just essentially been waiting for funding to actually build. And then we also have just kind of like the need to create redundancies in our water supply system. Right now, we rely on groundwater to source 80% of the water on the nation. Most municipal systems in the country only rely on groundwater for 20% of the water that they're supplying in their system. So, and groundwater, of course, has a finite supply. It's not replenished as quickly and as readily as surface water. And so part of the settlement objective is to maximize the amount of surface water that we're bringing to the nation to reinvigorate our supply system, so we have better protections for our groundwater supply to carry us into the future when the surface water is less available. And then additionally, just having redundancies, having more than one source of water to make sure that if we were experiencing shortages or challenges with one supply source, we can pull from the other supply source. And the settlement allows us to do that much more readily than the adjudication does. And just an example of how the adjudication works and how that's more of a reductive process. With respect to the aquifers that are underneath the nation, like let's take the In aquifer that is it underlies the Hopi tribe and the Navajo Nation entirely. But in the adjudication, there is no presumption that the tribes can have all of the water from the In aquifer. We have to affirmatively establish that based on historic, existing, and future uses. But in the settlement, very obviously to everyone in the room, all of that in aquifer water should be going to one tribe or the other. Anyway, so there's a lot of reasons why settlement is much more beneficial to the nation than litigation. And what we saw happen so far in the adjudication is we saw a recommendation from the special master. These are people who, maybe have visited Indian country or Navajo or Hopi maybe once or twice in their entire life. So they're not familiar with our communities and especially not familiar with the needs of our communities or our visions for the future. And so these are folks that are making these decisions on what our water access should be going forward. And they're coming from they're from Phoenix. And so just their perspective is very different and it's not particularly sympathetic. And so what Hopi saw was a reduction in their claim. They asked for, as much as they thought they could justify. And the special master came back with a recommendation that they get a third of what they asked for. Looking at our claim, we don't know what the special master is going to recommend, but our special master is also, not from Indian country, not particularly familiar with Indian tribes, and in particular is not familiar with the Navajo Nation. So that's one of the challenges in the litigation is being in a state court with an individual who is not familiar with Indian country or our communities. So in settlement, we're speaking for ourselves directly with the other parties. Many of the other parties are from up north, so they better understand they're our neighbors, and they better understand the needs of our community. All right, Michelle. There are a number of parties in the settlement. Here's a list of them. Essentially, it's Navajo Nation, Hopi Tribe, San Juan Southern Paiute, the United States, the state of Arizona, and the parties to the LCR adjudication. We mentioned the different basins that will be part of it. That includes the groundwater for the nation, primarily the In aquifer and the Sea aquifer, as well as effluent. Michelle, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. So from the upper basin, the proposed allocation for the Navajo Nation is 44,700 acre feet a year of this upper basin for the Navajo Nation. And this comes from the state of Arizona, the allocation received during the 1922 compact, in which tribes were not a part of, but the basin states were part of that compact. And Arizona was allocated, because of the Navajo Nation, the 50,000 acre feet a year. 3,000 acre feet was set aside for the Page community, for the Page area. And also there will be some upper basin allocated for the Hopi tribe in the settlement. Did you want to say anything else about this section?
No.
No? Okay. So in the Little Colorado River main stem water, the Navajo Nation would receive all of the main stem water that reaches the Navajo Nation, and we estimate that the historic flows are 122,000 acre feet a year. This includes quantified amounts and priority dates for specific historic Navajo irrigation projects. The Little Colorado River tributary water, so all tributary water that reaches the Navajo Reservation. And main stem Lower Colorado River Basin. This is fourth priority Lower Basin Colorado River water. And for the Navajo Nation, the allocation would be 3,600 acre feet a year, and this includes 100 acre feet a year of Cibola Lower Basin water. Do you want to add anything to that, AJ? No? Okay. And as the Attorney General mentioned, all groundwater, the Coconino Aquifer, all that underlies the Navajo Reservation. And the N Aquifer, the Navajo Aquifer, all that underlies the Navajo Reservation, subject to, we do have an agreement between the Navajo Nation and the Hopi tribe, which would limit the nation from pumping to 8,400 acre feet a year of water, and then 2,000 of that could be used for industrial purposes.
Each tribe has 2,000 acre feet that they could use for industrial purposes.
So there are allotments on the Navajo portion of the in Arizona. And so Section 1 allotments those are allotments that are on the reservation. The United States represents as trustee those allottees, and they will settle these claims, and the allottees will be served with the Navajo Nation's water. Projects. You want to?
Sure. So this map is one map that shows you where there are homes that have lack of access to piped water. And the brown chapters are the ones that have, I think it's 200 or more homes that don't have access to piped water in their homes. You can see it's mostly up northern area, Kayenta and north of Kayenta into Utah. Of course, my community in Loop, Cameron, let's see, is that Dilcon? Is that Dilcon? No, that's not Dilcon. Little bits and pieces here and there elsewhere on the nation. So again, I don't know if our tech team has the ability. Do you mind? I sent a map. Yes. Yeah. Okay, perfect. So there's another map that doesn't have these boxes on top of it, and that's the NTUA Global Water Map, and that really shows you where there are homes without access to piped water. And the projects that we're talking about here would provide a solution to that. In the context of the settlement negotiations, we've been talking about how do we fill out this map. And granted, the price tag for this filling out this comprehensive map is extremely large. It's billions of dollars in size, and we don't expect that we're going to get full funding for all of these projects in our settlement. We are planning to ask for a tremendous amount of funding from the federal government to advance us on this path. And again, if we were to just rely solely on the adjudication, we would not be receiving any funding to help move the nation towards greater access to piped water in our homes. So one of the primary projects that many of you are probably familiar with, and that's actually already under construction and is already serving some homes, is the what has been called the Western Navajo Pipeline. That's going to be renamed because we'll be sharing that with the Hopi tribe once we move forward with a successful settlement, of course. So you can see there that we're hoping that would supply upper basin water. On the upper left-hand side of the map, you can see that serving the Lachee area, it looks like Botaway Gap area, and then that pipeline would continue coming south and would bring lower basin water as well, and it would supply Tuba City, Moenkopi, and Cameron. And then we have the upper basin groundwater projects that would kind of extend projects that are being pursued and constructed as part of our Utah settlement and bring them further south, all the way down to Kayenta area, and that would potentially include an underground storage system for water and essentially aquifer replenishment opportunity. And then we have the upper basin projects around the Dennahotso area and the Four Corners area. So essentially water that we would bring into the Tisnas Pass area and bring down to Rock Point, Round Rock, Mini Farms, and Chinle. So that's that large rectangular box on the upper right-hand side. And then there would be some offshoots from the existing Navajo Gallup water supply project line that would bring water into Fort Defiance and further into Ganado. It would also bring water into Lupton. And then we have, of course, the Sea Aquifer project, the Southwestern Navajo project that would bring water from Loop to Bird Springs and Dilcon and intertie eventually with the Ganado system. And on that point of redundancy earlier, by intertying all of these systems, that creates the opportunity for backup water supplies. If there's ever disruptions for any purposes, then we can pull in water from somewhere else to ensure that communities have that water security that they need. So that is what the global system looks like. That's the vision. And again, the settlement would help us move this vision into reality quite a bit, quite substantially. And so we're very excited about that possibility. Again, the largest settlement that we've seen, the largest settlement funding we've seen is $1.2 billion. So, that's kind of what Congress has experience authorizing that has been successful. So we're certainly taking note of that, but also keeping in mind the extensiveness of the nation's claim and the fact that here we're dealing with not just one tribe, but we're dealing with 3 Indian nations. So we do expect that the funding will be quite significant. So Michelle, was there something else you wanted to add regarding the projects?
No, we have another list if we go back to the PowerPoint. I think you did great. That's a great map for that. So, and you did cover this. Maybe we don't need to go through these slides. So the also included as a project is Navajo Renewable Energy, and this would help with the development of the projects and even keeping our energy costs down. So that's also included in the settlement.
Yeah, to operate the pipeline system requires a great deal of energy. And so that's why the solar component is there to ensure that we do have additional energy sources to help facilitate the transfer of the water throughout the system.
Right. And then also included, the AG did talk about funds for the settlement, and included is Operation Maintenance and Replacement Fund, and that would help defray the costs of delivery. And so that's very important for us to advocate for. And then also included is a Navajo Agricultural Conservation Fund. It's intended to improve historical irrigated Navajo farmland. And we know from our outreach to the public that this is very important to the Navajo
And
people.
not just farmland, but also ensure that agricultural folks get to have continued access to water for livestock as well, so that there's no interruption in that as this development moves forward. We know that's, I mean, I come from a ranching family, and that's extremely important. I mean, our livestock is kind of like the primary reason why some of us exist, is to make sure to take care of our livestock. And certainly that's how my mom lives her life. So, you know, we want to make sure that those families who continue those traditional agricultural practices continue to have access to the uninterrupted water supply that they've always relied upon, but, you know, which has been challenging. We've had, you know, a lot of windmills go down in recent years, and so this is to be some sort of a solution to those types of challenges. Maybe not a complete solution, but certainly to kind of bridge the gap as we pursue these broader systems of water delivery.
We are now to our questions and comments portion. I don't know if let's see if we can pull up some of our, I'm sure that we do have some questions and comments.
Yeah, I don't see any comments. Usually in this StreamYard, we'll pick up all the comments and questions, but I don't see any. I guess we were extremely thorough.
So I do want to say something more about the funds. So we do have a request, and as the Attorney General pointed out, it is going to be a large request because there's a lot of need on the Navajo Nation. And again, we actually have to wait to see what Congress does, how much they fund. I wish we could tell the Navajo people today, you know, that it's guaranteed, but it's not. At this point in time, where our settlement is now going to go through the congressional process, the political process, and so it would be important to advocate to your elected leaders the importance of funding and approving this settlement. But we are now going to, you know, that's our next obstacle is to get that funding to fund all of the projects that are proposed in the settlement. And we're talking up in the billions of dollars. That's what the Navajo Nation's needs are. And that was the map that the Attorney General just shared earlier. Do we have any questions yet, Attorney General?
It doesn't look like we do. I know we were working on putting together an FAQ, because we saw there were actually not as many questions as I thought we would get during the presentation on Wednesday. But based on the questions that we saw come in, we are working on a frequently asked questions document that we'll be posting on the Water Rights Commission's website. So folks can have access to that. One thing that I wanted to touch on that Michelle mentioned earlier was the composition of our team. We have a really, really great team. I don't think we've ever been in this situation where we've had such a Navajo presence on the team, where we're speaking for ourselves. And, you know, we're coming to the table with the legal and technical expertise ourselves. And we have that lived experience on the nation that's informing the negotiations and how we move forward. So that has been really, really incredible. And it's just I have greatly enjoyed working with this team. Everybody has some really incredible skills, talent, and knowledge that they're bringing to the table. You know, we're joined by a former Attorney General, Louis Dennett Sosi, who brings a great deal of institutional knowledge. Bitta Becker in the President's Office, former Director of Natural Resources, former Navajo DOJ Water Rights Unit attorney. We have Michelle, who started her career in the Department of Justice and worked in water rights. And we were blessed to have her come back to us and get to be a part of really moving forward settlements that have just kind of sat there and really needed attention and initiative in moving them forward, and has done just a really great job of bringing forward lots of different settlements. We have the amendments to the Navajo Gallup Water Supply Project Act that she's been moving forward through. That's in Congress right now. We have the Rio San Jose Basin settlement in New Mexico, and that's going to include the Rio Puerco settlement as well. That is ready for that settlement is final and will be moving in the near term. She has the Zuni River settlement that is substantially along the way towards final settlement. And of course, we have this comprehensive Arizona water settlement, which I don't think we've ever had a comprehensive Arizona settlement on the table before. It's mostly been focused on the Little Colorado River, and some of the firmest water in the system is that upper basin water, because that's 50,000 acre feet off the top before the allocation to the upper basin states, and that's water that we know will be delivered. And we are in the context of the negotiations. There are discussions about the shortages in the system across the board, and so we're still talking through how to address that. But as it stands now, that upper basin water is some of the firmest water on the river in Arizona. So we're very happy to have so much of that on the table for the nation. I don't think we've ever had that much on the table for the nation.
I'm going to go back to that map, to that slide.
That would be great.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we're looking at there is essentially all of the upper basin water that is reserved for Arizona coming to the nation, except for the 3,000 for Page. And there's a small amount that goes to Park Service and other federal agencies that utilize that water. And that includes all of the water that was opened up, that upper basin water that was opened up from the closure of Navajo Generating Station. So that would all be coming to the nation and be a tremendous source of water. One of the things that we have to do in this settlement is, can you show the map that shows upper and lower basin?
Sure.
So the way the law of the river works now, you can't move water between the upper basin and the lower basin. But of course, the nation is, we're in the upper basin as well as the lower basin. That's the best map we have.
I think it is for this PowerPoint.
So the highlight there is not what I would look at. I would look in the upper right-hand corner.
Yes.
That shows the blue is the lower basin of the Colorado River, and the red, well, basically everything north of that, northwest of that is upper basin Colorado River. But the dividing line on the upper basin and the lower basin on the river is at Lee Ferry. And I did say that not plural, because apparently that's the legal, the way that they refer to it in legal documents. So that's really exciting. I'm very, very pleased that we have so much upper basin water coming to the nation in this proposed settlement. So we are, again, today here in the Valley, literally in the next room. The negotiating team is continuing to talk through some final terms of the settlement. We have a number of members of our team in there continuing to move those discussions forward.
I wanted to say a couple of things that are part of our negotiations. As you'll see in this map, and sorry we don't have a better map that can be enlarged, but you'll see that we the Navajo Nation is within 3 states, and actually we do have some land in Colorado as well. But you'll see that we're not only in the upper basin, but we're in the lower basin, and then we have these state lines to deal with. Part of the settlement, we're talking about that problem, and it is. It's a problem because as we saw in the San Juan settlement, the San Juan River settlement in New Mexico, we had to negotiate with the upper basin states and the lower basin states to allow the water to flow from the upper basin to the lower basin, and so just trying to get our projects moving, we have that dilemma to deal with. And included also, we had the 6411 to be delivered into Arizona through the New Mexico project. We had to go through quite a few obstacles to be able to get that permission, and it had to come from a congressional act. And still today, we have issues. The conditions that were placed in that, we're not able to run the water through those pipes until we have a settlement, until we have the agreement and authorization to do so. So in the settlement, we've been really advocating hard that the Navajo Nation shouldn't have to continue to go through these hoops. And we are getting support to deal with that, and we'll continue to advocate for that. Also, AG, I thought we could talk about the buffer zones.
So that is the term in the settlement, is to be able to move that upper basin water into the lower basin and vice versa on the nation within the state of Arizona, so that we have the flexibility to actually be able to meet the water demand needs of our community and have water security into the future.
Right. And after this settlement, we'll have one in each of the states that we lie in. And so we're going to keep working with those states and their water departments to be able to manage our projects as best as we can. And AG, we know that protecting our water sources is very important to the Navajo people. You want to talk a little bit about the buffer zones and the work that we did to bring those back into the settlement discussions, and then to make sure that water is protected in these areas of the settlement?
Sure. Do you want to show the map of the sea aquifer? Wow, I can't believe we have no questions. It's amazing.
Is this a good one?
Yeah, this is, well, let's see. It'll be kind of hard for folks to see this, but
there's the Navajo aquifer.
Okay, that one's okay. So you guys can see I think that's Canyon Diablo. That's actually really close to my family's ranch. I spent some time in that canyon. Beautiful, beautiful area. And then right below that, you see Two Guns and Loop Corner. So between Two Guns and Loop Corner, and then all the way up to the community of Loop, which is kind of where that highway intersects with the LCR. That is kind of the primary area to draw quality sea aquifer water from. It's also an area that folks outside of the nation are very interested in drawing sea aquifer water from. The city of Flagstaff purchased the Red Gap Ranch, which is it's kind of that triangle between Loop Corner, going up to the reservation line. Michelle, can you just leave it on that side?
I don't know what happened. Sorry. Here we go.
Okay. So it's that triangle that goes from, you can't see Twin Arrows on there, but Twin Arrows is basically at the southwestern corner of the reservation. And then that's I-40 cutting southeast and then cutting up north. So that area there, a big portion of that on the eastern side is Red Gap Ranch, and the city of Flagstaff purchased a number of parcels there in order to develop a water supply for their municipal system. And that is something that we have a side agreement that we're negotiating with the city of Flagstaff on, and we have a pre-existing agreement with them regarding that as well. But essentially, we wanted to put pumping limits on their use south of the reservation line. And so that's something that we've negotiated here, and that will give protection to the wells. We have 3 primary wells south of Loop that will be the major water sources for the nation's southwestern Navajo water supply system. And so that is really great. It's going to allow a path forward for Flagstaff to have that water as a supply source without creating undue risk for our water supply system. And we actually will be able to utilize water coming from Red Gap Ranch up to 1,000 acre-feet a year for a backup supply for Navajo Nation. So if there's ever any impairment, say we need to move one of our wells and shut it down, we can pull that water from Red Gap Ranch's system as an emergency backup supply, or we can run that water to Twin Arrows in the event that we do additional development there and we reach capacity in terms of the existing wells, and we decide that it's less expensive to bring that water from Red Gap. We can use that as a source rather than drilling additional wells. And in the event that there is impairment of wells, we can also intermix that higher quality water from the south in with the water in our distribution system. So that was one major important thing that we were able to work out in terms of the sea aquifer. And then other property owning interests south of the nation, of course, there's Hopi Tribe at Heart Ranch. And Heart Ranch is basically from really its Meteor Crater exit all the way to Twin Arrows on both the north and south sides of the freeway. I apologize, we don't have a map showing that in detail, but we were able to work out a deal with Hopi Tribe to limit their pumping as well. So in addition to the city of Flagstaff, Hopi Tribe will have a pumping cap south of the reservation. Both of those interests will have a buffer for the nation where they can't build large wells. So for Hopi Tribe, that's a 1 mile buffer for their fee land parcel, or not fee land, but for their trust parcels. And then on their state leased land, and that area is checkerboarded with state leased land and what used to be fee land. So on their leased land, it'll be the entire section, which is just a little bit longer than 1 mile. So they will have a little jagged buffer zone, and that's where we get the most protection for our sea aquifer wells, is in that first mile distance from the well. And actually, even with Hopis, if they were to build something right up against that border, they'd still be 2 miles away from our nearest well. So that gives us really great protection from Hopi pumping interests that might be south of the nation. And then with the city of Flagstaff, they have 13 wells, and one of them is north of the buffer we established with them, which is a 2-section buffer, which is roughly equivalent to 2 miles south of the reservation line. But they've agreed to not utilize that well and not pump anything significant within that 2 mile buffer zone. They'll be pulling all of their water from south of that, what we call buffer zone 1. They'll be drilling in buffer zone 2. So again, buffer zone 1, and that's going to run, that applies to basically everyone other than the Hopi Tribe. And well, we do have a couple more federal exceptions. We're not applying the buffer zones to National Park Service or the National Forest. There's some National Forest land near Twin Arrows, and of course National Parks land over at Painted Desert and Petrified Forest, and then of course over at the Grand Canyon. But for everybody else, there's a buffer zone 1 all the way to the New Mexico border, primarily along the southern border of the reservation, but it also does curve upward along the western border of the reservation for a certain distance. That is 2 sections long. So again, that's about 2 miles in distance from the reservation boundary. And then, and in buffer zone 1, people will continue to be able to drill small wells. So what we call exempt wells, that would be 35 gallons per minute, relatively little impact to neighboring wells. And then in buffer zone 2, which is an additional 4 sections south or west of buffer zone 1, they'll have the ability to build larger wells, so up to 500 gallons per minute, which is roughly equivalent to 8,000 some odd acre feet per year. And we did in our public presentation on Wednesday, we did get questions about what an acre foot is. That's essentially a football field filled 1 feet high with water, and that's enough to supply, I think it's a family of 4 for a year with water, right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. So in any event, so in buffer zone 2, that's about, it's limiting the well size to the 500 acre feet per year. And then south of buffer zone 2, there are no restrictions on pumping. And what this means, I'm saying restrictions on well pumping, but really it's if a well larger than the allowable size is operating and it results in an injury to the nation's water rights, then we would be able to object to that well and enforce against the well owner. So, and we don't expect to experience injury to our water supply system until there's about 30% impairment or reduction in the thickness of our saturated aquifer thickness. This is highly technical stuff. And so I guess what I'll say to break it down into regular people language is that that is something that's going to be happening underground. Nobody's going to see it. We will be monitoring it. And once that happens, then we might start to see some impact. And we don't anticipate, if everybody south of us was pumping up to their limits under our agreements, we wouldn't expect to see that 30% reduction anytime in the next 100 years. And again, that would only be if they were pumping at the maximum under their agreements. The types of impairment that we might see would be, either a change in quantity, access to quantity, or water quality. The biggest risk in these wells south of Loop is salinity. And so those are the protections that we've built in there. And for the Red Gap Branch project, while it's large and the city of Flagstaff is looking to pump 12,000 acre feet per year south of us, and that's what our agreement allows for. That is a $500 million project, and they don't have a source of funding at this time. We don't know when they will have a source of funding, or when or if that project will eventually be built. If it is built, we certainly want to be able to draw water from that system, and that's what we've negotiated for. The other interest south of the nation is Bar Ranch, and they basically own the land that's south of Red Gap Ranch, and it goes all the way up to Canyon Diablo, essentially, and Two Guns. So they also have an agreement with some restrictions on their pumping. They're further south of us, so we don't anticipate to have as many impacts from them just because of the distance they are from the nation's wells, but we did want to have those additional protections as well. And then, of course, the Arizona State Land Department has substantial interest. As I mentioned earlier, they're checkerboarded parcels. Every other section south of the reservation is Arizona State Land Trust lands that they lease to, south of us, mostly they lease to ranches. And primarily Barty Bar, City of Flagstaff, and Hopi Tribe. So, but with respect to them, they have the ability to, in order to ensure that there's well spacing with them, their lessees will have the opportunity to aggregate parcels to develop wells up to particular sizes. So they won't be able to just drill however they wish. Michelle is.
I'm forwarding it because we're about done, and I wanted to be able to put up our contact information.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, great. There's a formula that folks would have to use, and that is essentially, the size of the well that they want to operate times 1.2, and that will tell them how much acreage they have to pledge that they won't develop wells on. And so, like if they want 1,000 acre or 1,000 GPM well, they would have to pledge 1,200 acres, which is essentially two sections, to be able to operate a well that size. And so that's a way, again, of just making sure that wells are not densely packed together. And then the land that they have to pledge to give up pumping rights to would be the land closest to the nation's reservation line. So that is what I have, and I think we're running out of time here with our presentation, and I just want to thank everyone for joining. Thank the Navajo people for your deep interest in the nation's water security and our water rights. And please come to our public presentations. We have 13 of them that will start on Saturday all over the nation and over the course of the next few weeks. So, yeah. Michelle, do you want to say anything before we
Well, I was just going to say I had posted the Navajo Water Rights Commission webpage. That is a great source of information. Yeah. We also have information posted on the Navajo Department of Justice's webpage. They did take it off just now, but if you Google there you go. Here's the link to the Water Rights Commission. They have the schedule of the public events. They also have all of the events that we've recorded, the radio forums that we've had, our lunch and learns, and they just have a plethora of information on our water rights activities. So you're welcome to look at the link. You're welcome to contact us at the Water Rights Unit. We're trying to be as transparent as possible. So I just want to thank you all for joining us during this Lunch and Learn and at all of our public events. Your comments, your questions are so important to us, and we're doing everything that we can to respond to them. And I just want to thank the Attorney General as well for her leadership. She has been a great leader with our team and also in the negotiation room. She definitely is a fighter, and she has her heart in the right place. And so I'm very appreciative of her and very much enjoy working with her. So thank you, Attorney General.
Ditto, Michelle. Ditto. Michelle has just been wonderful to work with. She has so many things going all at once, and is just great at making sure things are moving forward and getting done. So I just really appreciate, and the positive energy also. I like to call her the closer. So when we have a tough
heard that before
with the other parties, we just send Michelle in, and she helps bring things to a close. So, but again, everyone on the team is just so amazing.
Yeah. Including those that are helping us with these lunch and learns.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my
Kevin.
Gosh, Kevin.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Yeah. We're so thankful for all that you do, Kevin and Byron. And,
all of you.
Darren. All right, everyone. Have a great Friday, and we hope to see you at our public meetings. Bonnet.